This video is by Straight Goods News, SGNews.ca.
We're here today to start rolling up the red carpet to the Senate. We're starting a conversation with Canadians who agree with us that an institution comprised of unelected people who can, as they did in the case of Jack Layton's climate change bill, reverse legislation that was duly adopted by people who have been elected, that contains mostly party bagmen, defeated candidates, and that's becoming increasingly scandalous because of all the promises that Stephen Harper has broken. His 59 Senate appointments include a lot of people who have been rejected by the voters. It's even more galling what he's been doing. The Stephen Harper who talked about the Senate in 2005 said if it can't be reformed, it should be abolished. Well, we're going to try to hold Stephen Harper to his word. The Senate cannot be reformed. You can't reform something that contains people who have never been elected, who don't understand the very principles of our democracy, and who are behaving as the ones that we've just seen in the past week. It's become a scandal that won't go away for Mr. Harper. Unfortunately, he left the country. We're here to talk to you about why it's so important to be forthright with Canadians about what the NDP has had as policy for 50 years. The Justin Trudeau has said that the only problem with the Senate is that there are not enough Liberal senators. Mr. Harper promised to get rid of the Senate if he was elected, if it couldn't be reformed. He's broken all records by appointing 59 Conservative bagmen, organizers, and other hangers-on, including defeated candidates. What we're saying is this, that from all of the work that we've done across Canada, we're not meeting anyone who says that the Senate can be reformed or that it should be saved. We live in a democracy. Only elected people should make laws. Only elected people should be allowed to unmake laws. We're going to stop trying to find excuses for keeping a bunch of party hacks, bagmen, political operatives, and defeated candidates sitting in appeal of the decisions of the duly elected members of the House of Commons. That's over. That's a game of the past. It's a mugs game, where you try to find an individual in the Senate who's not so bad, where you try to find something that they've done in the past that wasn't horrible. The real question is, in 2013, how can you possibly continue to argue to keep an institution of unelected people who have the power to reverse the decisions of duly elected members?
I'd like to ask you about what happened here in the Senate last night. Liberal senators were trying to get a motion to send the Duffy report and audit to the RCMP, formally asking the RCMP to investigate. The Conservatives used their speaker in the majority to turn that down, to send the Duffy report back to a committee which whitewashed it in the first place.
The whitewashing by the Senate is the beginning of the end of the Senate. The scandal began the day that they showed that they weren't even determined, willing, or able to investigate Mike Duffy. Don't forget, the Prime Minister stood in the House of Commons and tried to whitewash Pamela Wallin while the issue was supposedly being dealt with by the Senate, which are his caucus colleagues in the Conservative caucus. That shows how little respect he had for the institution, but it also was a transparent indication of the fact that the whole process was a joke. So that the Conservatives are still trying to wash everything under the rug, that's obvious. That's why we want to start rolling up that rug. It's time to roll up the red carpet. It's time to get rid of the Senate.
Is that the end of the story then?
I don't think that there's anything plausible in any of the explanations that we got yesterday. I was watching a very artful performance by John Baird as he tried to put a cover on the pressure cooker and gave no answers. Everything was artful in the letter that we got from one of the attorneys. It looked like a slalom course. Maybe Senator Nancy Green will be able to help navigate that. But it's what's not said in that letter as much as what they try to say in that letter. So John Baird yesterday was trying to say that there were independent investigations. We asked him before the end of question period. Nathan Collins said, well, what are you talking about? He couldn't give an answer. Those were lines he had been given to repeat. But it turns out that the so-called investigation is the same gang of senators who whitewashed the last time, trying to whitewash again, trying to stop anything from actually coming out. They're all in an operation now where one is trying to cover off the other. But at the bottom of it, we're going to be talking to Canadians about abolishing the Senate, rolling up the red carpet. That's where Canadians are.
It's not before the Supreme Court of Canada. You were asked about this in French. It's before the Supreme Court of Canada. Experts are saying that it could well require unanimity of the provinces. If that's the case, is this not all just wishful thinking if you have a province like Quebec that says we'll never abolish the Senate?
What we've watched for many years is people talk about reform when they're in opposition and do nothing when they're in power. That's what Stephen Harper was all about. Talked a good game on Senate reform when he was in opposition, did nothing once he was in power. The fact that they've punted it to the Supreme Court changes nothing in our obligation to tell Canadians that when an NDP government is elected in 2015, we will indeed follow through on our undertaking to abolish the Senate. That will require having the Canadian public on side. It will require close work with the provinces and territories. We understand that. We're not saying, Craig Scott's a respectable and respected constitutional lawyer. He's worked on these issues for years. We know how complex it's going to be. But if you don't start, if you're not serious about it, you'll never get it done. I'd like to hear Stephen Harper say that he's going to put all the documents on the table. Yesterday, artfully, they tried to produce something by one lawyer and said, and John Baird saying, there's no document on that. Well, what does that mean? If there's an exchange of emails, if you're setting up a trust, you don't think that there are documents? Of course there are. So it's always artful. It's always no documents on that. There's this, there's that. Be clear, be forthright, stop hiding out in the Andes, get back up here, tell people what actually happened. We watched them roll out such an incredible series of excuses last week, it wasn't even funny. From Wednesday to Thursday, from Thursday to Friday, all of a sudden Nigel Wright was the best guy on the face of the earth just before he got thrown under the bus. There's something that doesn't wash in this whole story. Canadians understand that, they get that. There's bogus investigations by the Senate. They're shutting down any real investigation. That's why we say it's high time to get rid of the Senate, but Stephen Harper's got to come clean with Canadians.